Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The maintenance alert screamed through Riker Sol's neural implant at 6 o'clock hours, jolting him from dreams of burning ships and alien screams. He rolled off his narrow bunk in Hab 7, muscles protesting the cheap mattress and 3 years of courier runs that had turned his spine into a roadmap of knots. "Just perfect," he muttered, pulling on yesterday's flight suit. The fabric still reeked of recycled air and engine coolant. Ode to frontier life. Nova 5 stretched beyond his porthole like a metallic spiderweb against the void, her docking arms bristling with ships from a dozen worlds. The trading station hummed with the desperate energy of beings trying to make a living at the ass end of civilized space, exactly where Riker belonged. His comm chirped. Administrator Darkin's voice crackled through the static. "Sol, get your sorry hide to Bay 94. We've got a situation." Riker's gut clenched. In his experience, situations usually meant someone wanted him to ferry contraband through a blockade or retrieve something from a ship that had stopped answering hails. The kind of jobs that paid well because they had a high probability of ending with laser burns or vacuum exposure. Bay 94 hummed with activity when he arrived. A pristine diplomatic shuttle sat in the center, its hull gleaming with the kind of polish that screamed important people inside. The Xerian delegation had arrived. Darkin paced near the airlock, his usually composed demeanor cracked like cheap plasteel. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the bay's climate control. "Sol, thank the stars you're here. We have a clusterfuck of galactic proportions." "Let me guess," Riker said, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs. "The space elves want their princess back." "Worse." Darkin's voice dropped to a whisper. "The cultural exchange program just went sideways. Our assigned liaison caught the Martian flu, and the backup is stuck in quarantine. The Xerians are already suspicious of us, and if we don't provide proper accommodation for their delegate, the alliance crumbles. Humanity gets blacklisted from half the galaxy, and we all end up eating synthetic protein for the rest of our miserable lives," Riker finished. "So what's this got to do with me?" Darkin's smile resembled a grimace. "Congratulations, you're our new cultural liaison." "Absolutely not." Riker took a deep drag, letting the smoke burn his lungs. "I'm a courier, not a babysitter. Find someone else." "There is no one else. Every other qualified person is either off-station or tied up with the Centauri trade dispute. Besides, you have prior military experience with first contact protocols." "Yeah, and look how well that turned out." The words tasted bitter as the cigarette. Riker crushed the butt under his heel. "My last first contact ended with body bags." "That wasn't your fault. Try telling that to the families." Riker turned toward the exit. "Find another sucker, Darkin. 50,000 credits." Riker's stride faltered. He turned back slowly. "What?" 50,000, plus accommodation and meal allowances. 1 week maximum." The number hit Riker like a plasma bolt. 50,000 would clear his debts, maybe even buy him passage to the outer rim where no one gave a damn about his service record, where he could disappear completely. 1 week, he said, and I'm not wearing a fucking uniform." The shuttle's airlock hissed open with a sound like escaping souls. Riker straightened his shoulders and tried to look like someone who hadn't spent the last 3 years hauling freight through pirate-infested space routes. She emerged from the shuttle like something from a fever dream. The woman, no, female, he corrected himself, stood nearly 6 feet tall with curves that would make a mathematician weep. Her skin shimmered with a subtle luminescence, green as deep ocean water touched by alien starlight. When she turned her head, her eyes caught the bay's harsh lighting and blazed electric blue. Riker's mouth went dry. Every rational thought evaporated like atmosphere through a hull breach. She wore a simple white dress that flowed like liquid mercury, revealing and concealing in all the right places. Her movements carried the fluid grace of someone who had never doubted her welcome in any room she entered. "I am Zalia Varen," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made the station's ambient noise seem crude by comparison. "You must be my assigned cultural liaison." Riker managed to close his mouth. "Riker Sol, welcome to Nova 5. She studied him with those impossible blue eyes, and he felt like a specimen under a microscope. "You are not what I expected." "Yeah, well, disappointment is our specialty out here." He gestured toward the exit. "Shall we?" As they walked through the station's corridors, Riker became acutely aware of the stares. Every being they passed, human, Centauri, even the usually stoic vegan traders, stopped to gawk at Zalia. She seemed oblivious to the attention, her gaze fixed on the station's architecture with scientific fascination. "Your habitat design is remarkably inefficient," she observed, pausing to examine a support beam. "These stress points will create metal fatigue within 50 years. "It's not built to last," Riker replied. "Most of us don't plan on being here that long." "How transient. On Xeria, our cities have stood for millennia. We build for permanence. Must be nice, having that kind of stability." She glanced at him sharply. "You disapprove?" "I don't disapprove of anything. Not my place to judge how other people live." They reached the residential section, where Darkin had hastily arranged adjoining quarters. Riker palmed the lock on the first door. "This is you. I'm next door if you need anything." Zalia stepped inside, then froze. Her luminescent skin flickered like a candle in a breeze. "We're sharing living space?" "Adjoining quarters, separate rooms, common area." Riker leaned against the doorframe. "Problem. On Xeria, unmarried males and females do not cohabitate. It's considered inappropriate." "Well, we're not on Syria, and unless you want to bunk with the Centauri traders next to the reactor core, this is what we've got." She turned to face him fully, and Riker caught the scent of something like ozone and spring rain. "Are you threatening me?" "Lady, I'm too tired to threaten anyone. I'm just stating facts." For a moment, tension crackled between them like static electricity. Then Zalia's posture relaxed fractionally. "I apologize. I'm adjusting to your customs." "We'll both be adjusting. This is as new for me as it is for you." She tilted her head, studying him again. "You've never worked with Xerians before?" "Not socially." The words came out harder than he intended. "But you have encountered my people?" Riker's jaw tightened. "Yeah, once. And it did not go well?" "You could say that." Silence stretched between them. Zalia's eyes seemed to bore into his skull, as if she could extract the memory by sheer force of will. "I see," she said finally. "Then we have something in common." "What's that?" "We both have reasons to fear this arrangement." Over the next 2 days they fell into an uneasy routine. Zalia spent her mornings in the station's library, absorbing human cultural data with the intensity of a scholar preparing for final exams. Afternoons she observed the station's inhabitants, taking notes on a device that projected holographic text in what Riker assumed was Xerian script. He found himself watching her more than he should, the way her skin glowed brighter when she was excited about a discovery, how she unconsciously mimicked the gestures of whoever she was observing, the graceful way she moved through crowds, never quite touching anyone but never seeming rude about it. On the 3rd day, she cornered him in their shared common area. "I wish to see the commercial district." Riker looked up from his meal, a barely edible protein bar and recycled coffee. "Why?" "To observe authentic human social interactions. Your entertainment media suggests that markets are centers of cultural exchange." Our entertainment media lies about a lot of things. Nevertheless, I would like to see for myself. Riker sighed. Fine, but stay close. The commercial district can get rough. Rough how? Pickpockets, con artists, drunk spacers looking for trouble. The usual. Her eyes widened. Violence? Sometimes. Don't worry. I'll keep you safe. Something flickered across her face. Surprise? Gratitude? Before he could identify it, she was moving toward the door. Shall we proceed? The commercial district sprawled across 3 levels of Nova 5's central hub, a maze of vendors, bars, and shops catering to every species and vice in the galaxy. The air thrummed with a dozen languages and twice as many currencies changing hands. Zalia stayed close to Riker's shoulder, her eyes wide with fascination. Remarkable! The sensory input is overwhelming. You should smell it when the waste recyclers malfunction. She paused at a vendor selling Centauri silk scarves, watching the elaborate haggling ritual between a human trader and the spider-like proprietor. The negotiation appears adversarial, yet both parties seem pleased with the outcome. Competition as cooperation. Humans are weird that way. And you find this entertaining? I find it profitable, when I'm not playing tour guide to alien dignitaries. She shot him a look that might have been amusement. Are you mocking me, Riker Soul? Just making conversation, Zalia Varen. They wandered deeper into the market, past stalls selling everything from vegan meditation crystals to illegal stimulants. Riker kept one eye on the crowd and the other on his charge. Zalia drew stares wherever they went, but so far no one had worked up the courage to approach. His stomach growled, a sound like a badly tuned engine. I need food, real food, not protein paste. I could prepare something, Zalia offered. Xerian cuisine is quite, no offense, but I've tried alien food before. Let's just say my digestive system prefers familiar territory. They stopped at a food vendor specializing in Earth cuisine, or at least the frontier's approximation of it. The proprietor, a grizzled human with burns scarring half his face, grinned when he saw Riker approach. Sol, haven't seen you in weeks. The usual? Yeah, Tony, and make it a big one. I'm hungry enough to eat a... Riker caught himself, glancing at Zalia. She was studying the menu board with scientific intensity, apparently unaware of his near slip. Make it a big one, he finished lamely. Tony ladled a generous portion of what might charitably be called chicken onto a plate, the meat glistening with grease and spices. The aroma hit Riker like a physical blow, salt, fat, and protein singing to his carnivorous human DNA. He took the plate and found a small table in the food court's corner. Zalia sat across from him, her posture perfect, hands folded in her lap. Aren't you eating? He asked. I consumed nutrition earlier. Please, proceed. Riker picked up the leg with both hands, feeling the crispy skin crackle under his fingers. The first bite was heaven. Juicy meat, perfectly seasoned, hot enough to burn his tongue. He tore off another piece with his teeth, savoring the texture and flavor. Across the table, Zalia had gone perfectly still. Her luminescent skin flickered like a dying light. The blue of her eyes darkened to navy, pupils contracting to pinpoints. Her breathing quickened, shallow and rapid. Zalia, you okay? She stared at the partially eaten chicken leg in his hands, her face a mask of horror. You're consuming flesh. Well, yeah, it's chicken. Tony makes the best flesh. The word came out as a whisper. Living tissue. You're eating something that was once alive. Riker set down the food, confused. It's just protein. Lab-grown, artificially, but it lived. Her voice cracked. It had form, structure, biological integrity. And you're devouring it. She stumbled backward from the table, nearly knocking over her chair. Other diners turned to stare as her skin began to pulse with distressed bioluminescence. I'm made of flesh too, she said, her voice rising. Muscle and bone and blood. If you can eat that, then you can eat— Whoa, hold on. Riker stood, hands raised peacefully. I'm not going to eat you, Zalia, it's just food. But she was already moving, backing away from him with quick, panicked steps. She bumped into a cargo container and darted behind it, crouching like a frightened animal. Don't come near me, she called out, her voice muffled by the metal. I won't let you consume me too. The food court had gone quiet. Every being in the area was staring at them, whispers spreading like wildfire. Riker could already imagine the reports reaching Darkin's desk. Cultural liaison traumatizes Exerian delegate on day 3. He approached the cargo container slowly, as if approaching a spooked horse. Zalia, listen to me. I eat chickens, not people. There's a difference. How can there be a difference? Flesh is flesh. Life is life. Because chickens aren't sentient. They don't think or feel or dream. They're just protein sources. That's what you'd say about me if you were hungry enough. The accusation hit him like a physical blow. No, I wouldn't. Never. How can I believe that? You just demonstrated that you're willing to consume living tissue for pleasure. What's to stop you from consuming me? Riker ran a hand through his hair, trying to find words that wouldn't make things worse. Look, I know this is hard to understand. Our species evolved differently. Humans are omnivores. We eat plants and meat. It's how we survived on Earth. Survival. She spat the word like a curse. You justify barbarism through necessity. It's not barbarism. It's biology. And what does your biology tell you about me? The question hung in the air like a live grenade. Riker found himself studying the way her dress clung to her curves, the graceful line of her neck, the soft swell of her breasts. His body responded with embarrassing enthusiasm. My biology, he said carefully, tells me you're beautiful and completely off limits. A long silence followed. Then, tentatively, she peered around the edge of the cargo container. Off limits how? In every way that matters. She emerged fully, her skin still flickering with residual distress. I don't understand your species, Riker Soul. Join the club. I don't understand mine either most days. She studied his face, searching for something. You're not what I expected when I volunteered for this program. What did you expect? A monster, a flesh-eating savage who would validate my father's warnings about human nature. Sorry to disappoint. You haven't disappointed me. That's the problem. They stood facing each other in the commercial district's harsh lighting, surrounded by the noise and chaos of a dozen worlds conducting business. But for a moment, it felt like they were the only two beings in the universe. We should go back, Riker said finally. Yes, we should. But neither of them moved. The silence stretched between them like a live wire, crackling with possibilities neither dared voice. Riker watched the play of light across Zalia's features, the way her luminescent skin cast ethereal shadows in the commercial district's harsh fluorescence. Her breathing had steadied, but those electric blue eyes still held echoes of panic. I need to understand, she said finally, her voice barely audible above the market's din. How you can be gentle with me, but savage with your food. Maybe because you're not food, Riker replied, then immediately regretted the flippancy. Her skin flickered with distress again. Sorry, that came out wrong. Did it? She stepped closer, close enough that he caught her scent, ozone and starlight. Or did it reveal something true? The question hung between them like a challenge. Riker found himself studying the curve of her lips, wondering what they'd taste like. The thought hit him like a plasma discharge, raw and unwelcome. We should go, he said, turning away before she could read his expression. But as they walked back through the station's corridors, the tension followed them like a shadow. The next morning, Riker woke to the sound of humming, a melodic, otherworldly tune that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. He pulled on yesterday's clothes and stumbled into the common area, expecting to find Zalia at her usual spot by the observation window. Instead, she knelt in the center of the room, her body moving in slow, hypnotic patterns. Her dress had been replaced by form-fitting exercise wear that left little to imagination. Every curve, every line of muscle was visible as she flowed from one position to another. Riker's mouth went dry. "What are you doing?" She didn't break her rhythm. Morning meditation. It helps center the mind for the day's challenges. Looks more like dancing. Movement is prayer. Prayer is movement. On Xeria, we don't separate the two. She rose gracefully, arms extending in a gesture that made her spine arch. The motion was innocent and erotic simultaneously, a fact that wasn't lost on either of them. "Want to try?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I don't dance. Everyone dances. Some just haven't learned how yet." Before he could protest, she was behind him, her hands settling lightly on his shoulders. Her touch burned through his shirt like brands. "Breathe," she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. "Feel the rhythm of your heartbeat." Riker's heart was doing things that had nothing to do with meditation. "Zalia, I don't think." "Don't think. Move." Her hands guided him through a series of simple gestures. Her body pressed close enough that he could feel her warmth through the thin fabric of her clothes. When she moved, he followed, drawn by some gravitational force he couldn't name. "Good," she murmured. "Now breathe with me. In, out." Their breathing synchronized, and something shifted in the space between them. The harsh geometry of the station seemed to soften, replaced by something older and more primal. Zalia's skin began to glow softly, patterns of light tracing along her arms and throat. "Is that normal?" Riker asked, his voice rougher than intended. "What?" "The glowing." She glanced down at herself and her luminescence flared brighter for an instant before dimming. "It happens when I'm emotionally elevated." "Emotionally elevated?" "Excited. Aroused. The terms are difficult to translate." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Riker turned in her arms, finding himself face to face with her. This close, he could see flecks of silver in her blue eyes, could count each individual eyelash. "Zalia." "Attention all residents," the station's comm system crackled to life. "Maintenance cycle will begin in Sector 7 in 10 minutes. Please clear all corridors." The moment shattered like crystalline glass. Zalia stepped back, her glow fading to normal levels. "I should prepare for today's observations." "Right. Observations." She paused at the door to her quarters. "Riker, thank you. For yesterday. For not consuming me. Anytime." But as the door hissed shut behind her, Riker wondered if that was entirely true. That evening they shared dinner in their common area, a carefully negotiated meal of roasted vegetables and synthetic proteins that satisfied both their dietary requirements and her moral sensibilities. Zalia had insisted on preparing it herself, her movements in the small kitchenette efficient and graceful. "Tell me about Earth," she said, settling across from him with her plate. "Your home world. What was it like?" Riker chewed thoughtfully. "Crowded, polluted, beautiful in places, ugly in others. Pretty much like every other world humans have touched." "You sound bitter." "Realistic." "And your family?" The question hit harder than he'd expected. "Dead. My parents died in the Martian agricultural collapse. My sister—" He set down his fork. "Ship accident, 3 years ago." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's not your fault humans are good at killing each other." Zalia studied him with those penetrating eyes. "Is that why you became a courier? To run from the pain?" "Maybe. Or maybe I just got tired of being responsible for other people's lives. And yet, here you are, responsible for mine." "Yeah, well, The universe has a sick sense of humor. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent electricity shooting up his arm. What happened, Riker? During your military service? The question he'd been dreading. Riker pulled his hand away, suddenly fascinated by the pattern of scratches on the table's surface. First contact mission, he said finally. Exerian research vessel lost in human space. My squad was sent to provide escort back to neutral territory. That sounds routine. It was until we encountered pirates. 3 ships, heavily armed. They wanted the Exerian technology. Riker's hands clenched into fists. My CEO ordered us to protect the civilians at all costs. What did you do? What I was trained to do. I engaged the pirates, drew their fire away from the research vessel. The memories flooded back. The screaming alarms, the taste of blood in his mouth, the way space lit up with weapons fire. But one of them got through, hit the Exerian ship with a plasma torpedo. Zalia's skin had gone pale, her luminescence dimmed to almost nothing. How many died? 43. Researchers, diplomats, children. His voice cracked on the last word. The survivors. They looked at me like I was a monster, like I'd failed them. You saved lives. I got people killed, Exerian people, your people. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she spoke, her voice was softer than silk. Is that why you're afraid of me? I'm not afraid of you. Liar. He looked up, meeting her gaze directly for the first time since he'd started talking. Fine. Yeah, I'm afraid. Not of you specifically, but of what you represent. Another chance to fuck up and get innocent people hurt. And what do I represent to you? The honest answer would have been dangerous, so he deflected. 50,000 credits and a clean slate. But Zalia wasn't fooled. She rose from her chair and moved around the table, stopping just close enough that he could feel her warmth. You're lying again. Zalia. You know what I think? She sat on the table's edge, her legs on either side of his chair. The position was intimate, predatory, completely unlike the sheltered academic he'd first met. I think you're afraid because you care, because for the first time in 3 years, you're not running away. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, feather-light and devastating. Your heart rate is elevated. Your pupils are dilated. Your breathing is shallow. These are signs of arousal, not fear. Both, actually. She laughed, a sound like silver bells in solar wind. At least you're honest about that. Before he could respond, she was leaning down, her lips a breath away from his. What are you afraid will happen if you stop running? The question was a trap, and they both knew it, but Riker found himself answering anyway. That I'll want something I can't have. Such as you. The admission hung between them like a live grenade. Zalia's skin began to glow again, soft patterns of light dancing across her throat and collarbone. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Who says you can't have me? This time, Riker was the one who leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deeper as her arms wound around his neck. She tasted like starlight and forbidden things, and when her tongue traced his lower lip, he groaned against her mouth. Her entire body began to shimmer, bioluminescent patterns spreading across her skin like a living constellation. She pulled back just far enough to speak, her breath hot against his lips. Is this normal for humans? This intensity? Nothing about this is normal, he admitted, his hands settling on her waist. Through the thin fabric of her dress, he could feel the heat of her skin, the rapid flutter of her pulse. Good, she whispered, and kissed him again. This time there was nothing tentative about it. Her mouth was hungry, demanding, and when she nipped at his lower lip with sharp teeth, electricity shot straight through him. He pulled her closer, off the table and into his lap, and she came willingly, her legs straddling his thighs. The position left no doubt about the effect she was having on him. Her eyes widened as she felt his arousal pressing against her, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she rolled her hips experimentally, drawing a strangled curse from his throat. "Fuck, Zalia." Is that a request or an expletive? Despite everything, he laughed. Both. She was moving against him now, slow and deliberate, her luminescence growing brighter with each motion. The sight of her, head thrown back, lips parted, body glowing like a fallen star, was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. His hands found the hem of her dress, fingers tracing the smooth skin of her thighs. She shivered at the contact, her glow pulsing like a heartbeat. "Your skin," he murmured. "It's incredible." "Touch me," she whispered. "Please." His hands moved higher, mapping the curve of her hips, the elegant line of her spine. Everywhere he touched, her skin flared brighter until she was blazing like a miniature sun in his arms. She was reaching for the fasteners of his shirt when the comm system crackled to life again. "Attention, Nova 5 personnel. Incoming diplomatic vessel requesting priority docking. All cultural exchange participants report to Bay 12 immediately." Zalia froze, her glow fading as if someone had thrown a switch. "No, it's too early. They weren't supposed to arrive for another week." "Who?" "My father." Her voice was flat with dread. "High Counselor Tharksol. He's come to evaluate my progress." The words hit Riker like cold vacuum. Reality crashed back around them, the impossibility of their situation, the political ramifications, the fact that they'd just crossed every line in the diplomatic handbook. Zalia climbed off his lap, her movements sharp with panic. "He can't know about this, about us. If he discovers we've been intimate, what happens?" "I'll be recalled immediately, subjected to purification therapy, and the cultural exchange program will be terminated." She was pacing now, her hands shaking. "Everything I've worked for, everything I hope to prove, will be destroyed." "Hey." Riker caught her hand, stilling her motion. "We'll figure this out." "How?" "You don't understand. My father believes humans are barely civilized predators. If he thinks you've corrupted me—" "Have I?" She looked at him then, really looked, and something shifted in her expression. "No, you've awakened me." The words were a confession and a promise wrapped together. But before either of them could explore what they meant, the comm system chimed again. "Miss Varen, please report to Bay 12 for immediate diplomatic reception." Zalia closed her eyes, visibly steeling herself. When she opened them again, the vulnerable woman was gone, replaced by the poised diplomat. "I have to go." "I know." She started toward the door, then turned back. "Riker, whatever happens, I want you to know, I don't regret this, any of it." "Neither do I." But as the door hissed shut behind her, Riker wondered if that would still be true when the dust settled. He'd spent 3 years running from his past, and now it seemed the past was catching up whether he liked it or not. Through the observation window, he could see the sleek lines of a Exerian diplomatic cruiser settling into Bay 12. Its hull gleamed with the kind of perfection that spoke of advanced technology and unlimited resources. The kind of ship that belonged to someone important, someone who could end everything with a word. Riker reached for his cigarettes, then remembered he'd smoked the last one that morning. Instead, he poured himself 3 fingers of synthetic whiskey and watched the stars wheel past the viewport. In a few hours, everything would change. He could feel it in his bones, the way a pilot feels turbulence before the instruments register it. The only question was whether they'd survive the storm. The diplomatic reception was exactly the kind of formal hell Riker had hoped to avoid when he left military service. The main conference room had been hastily decorated with both human and Xerian ceremonial elements, creating a cultural mishmash that satisfied no one. High Counselor Thark Soul stood at the center of it all like a statue carved from disapproval. He was tall even by Xerian standards, his silver hair braided with jewels that caught the light when he moved. His skin held the deep luminescence of age and authority, and when his gaze settled on Riker, it felt like being examined by a particularly judgmental deity. "You must be the cultural liaison," Tharksol said, his accent making the words sound like a formal indictment. "Riker Sol, sir." They didn't shake hands. Xerians found casual physical contact distasteful, especially with other species. "I have concerns about my daughter's placement," the counselor continued. "Her reports have been unusually enthusiastic about human customs." Riker kept his expression neutral. "She's been very thorough in her observations." Indeed, perhaps too thorough. Across the room, Zalia stood with perfect posture among the other diplomatic staff. She hadn't looked at Riker once since entering, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her luminescence flickered with barely contained stress. Administrator Darkin cleared his throat. "Counselor, we're honored by your visit. Perhaps we could discuss the exchange program's progress in more detail." "That won't be necessary," Thargzol replied. "I've already reached my conclusions." The room went silent. Even the ambient station noise seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "The experiment has been illuminating," the counselor continued, "but I fear my daughter has been exposed to influences that compromise her objectivity." "Father," Zalia spoke for the first time, her voice carefully controlled, "my research has been conducted within all established parameters." "Has it?" His gaze shifted between her and Riker, and something cold settled in the pit of Riker's stomach. "Tell me, daughter, have you maintained appropriate distance from your subjects?" "I have conducted myself professionally at all times." It wasn't technically a lie, but Riker could see the cost of the deception in the way her skin dimmed. "I see." Tharksol's tone suggested he saw more than anyone was comfortable with. "Then you won't object to enhanced monitoring during the remainder of your stay?" "Enhanced monitoring. Security personnel. Full documentation of all interactions, for your protection, of course." The trap was springing shut around them. Riker watched Zalia's face go through a series of micro-expressions: shock, anger, resignation. "Of course, Father. Whatever you deem necessary." "Excellent. The new protocols begin immediately." As the meeting dissolved into logistics and scheduling, Riker caught Zalia's eye for just an instant. The look that passed between them was loaded with everything they couldn't say: regret, longing, and the bitter knowledge that they'd run out of time before they'd barely begun. The game had changed. The question now wasn't whether they could explore what was growing between them. The question was whether they could survive what was coming next. The maintenance tunnel beneath Level C hummed with the station's mechanical heartbeat: recyclers, air processors, and life support systems that never slept. Riker pressed his back against the warm metal wall, listening for footsteps that never came. The surveillance detail Tharksol had assigned was thorough, but they hadn't yet figured out the station's hidden arteries. "This is insane," he muttered into the darkness. "Insanity is relative," came Zalia's voice from the shadows. She emerged from a service hatch, her luminescent skin providing the only light in the cramped space. "What's insane is pretending we don't exist." 3 days had passed since her father's arrival, 3 days of stolen glances and careful distances. The enhanced monitoring meant every conversation was recorded, every movement tracked. They were prisoners of protocol, caged by duty and expectations. But in the dark spaces between the station's bones, they could breathe. "How long before they notice you're gone?" Riker asked. 20 minutes. I told them I needed to meditate." She moved closer, close enough that he could see the stress patterns flickering across her throat. My father suspects something. He keeps asking about my emotional fluctuations. Maybe we should... She silenced him with a kiss, desperate and hungry. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him against her with a force that surprised them both. When they broke apart, she was glowing like starfire. "Don't," she whispered against his lips. "Don't tell me we should stop. Not here. Not when it's the only place we can be real." The maintenance tunnel became their sanctuary. Hidden alcoves where they could touch without watchers. Service corridors where whispered conversations couldn't be overheard. It was a romance built in shadows, measured in heartbeats and stolen moments. But shadows had a way of revealing secrets. The abandoned observatory sat at Nova 5's furthest extremity, a relic from the station's early days when someone had harbored dreams of serious astronomical research. Now it was forgotten space, its telescope dark and its systems powered down to save energy. Zalia had found it during her third day of meditation walks, following maintenance maps that revealed the station's hidden geography. When she led Riker through the access tunnel, he understood why she'd chosen it. The chamber was a sphere of transparent aluminum, suspended in space like a soap bubble. Stars wheeled around them in slow majesty, unfiltered by atmosphere or artificial light. It was like floating in the universe's heart. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's private." She sealed the hatch behind them, then activated a personal jamming device, illegal tech she'd somehow acquired from the black market vendors. No surveillance here, no watchers, just us. The implication hung between them like gravity. For the first time in days, they were truly alone. Zalia moved toward him with predatory grace, her glow painting the chamber in shifting patterns of green and gold. When she reached him, her hands went to the fasteners of his shirt. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I've never been more sure of anything." His shirt hit the deck, followed by her dress. In the starlight, her body was a masterpiece of curves and luminescence, every line perfect, every movement fluid as mercury. When she pressed against him, skin to skin, the contact sent electricity racing through his nervous system. "You're so warm," she whispered, her hands mapping the planes of his chest. "Human body temperature is fascinating. Right now, I'm running a few degrees hotter than normal." She laughed, low and throaty. "Show me. Show me how humans love." He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring 3 days of frustrated desire into the contact. She responded with alien passion, her luminescence flaring brighter as arousal swept through her. When his mouth moved to her throat, she arched beneath him with a sound that was part gasp, part purr. "Veltar Nethys," she breathed in Syrian. "My star-touched one." "What does that mean?" "It means you're mine." Her eyes met his, blazing blue in the green glow of her skin. "Is that acceptable to humans? Claiming ownership?" "Depends on the human." His hands traced the curve of her waist, drawing patterns of light across her flesh. "In this case, I'm willing to be claimed." They moved together in the starlight, two bodies becoming one in the ancient dance. She guided him with whispered directions in her own language, teaching him the rhythms that pleased her kind. He showed her human tenderness, the way desire could be both gentle and consuming. When she cried out his name at the peak, her entire body blazed like a supernova, lighting the observatory with otherworldly fire. The sight burned itself into his memory, her face transformed by ecstasy, her skin a constellation of living light. Afterward, they lay entwined on the chamber's deck, her head on his chest, watching the stars turn overhead. "Veltar Senem Keleth," she murmured against his skin. "And that means that I love you." The words were simple, devastating. In Syrian culture, physical intimacy creates a bond that transcends species. "You're part of me now, Riker Soul, Forever. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt something like peace settle in his chest. Good thing humans are possessive creatures. Good thing indeed. But even as they held each other in the starlight, both knew their time was running out. The message came through Riker's personal comm at 0400 hours, dragging him from dreams of luminescent skin and whispered promises. Administrator Darkin's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Sol, get to my office, now, and bring a lawyer if you have one." The corridors were eerily quiet as Riker made his way to the administrative sector. Even the usual background chatter of security comms was muted, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Darkin's office looked like a war zone. Data pads scattered across his desk, empty coffee cups marking the passage of a sleepless night. The administrator himself looked haggard, his usually pristine uniform wrinkled and stained. "Sit down, Sol. This is bad." Riker remained standing. "How bad?" "Your military record just got declassified. Apparently, certain parties have been digging into your background." Darkin activated his desk display, and Riker's service file appeared in holographic detail. "Care to explain why you didn't mention the court-martial?" The words hit like a physical blow. That was sealed. Not anymore. Combat aggression, disobedience of direct orders, civilian casualties. Darkin's voice was flat, professional. "You were acquitted on technicalities, but the optics are toxic." Riker sank into the chair, pieces clicking into place. Someone leaked this. Someone with access to military intelligence databases. Someone who wanted to paint you as exactly the kind of human the Exerians fear most, a barely controlled weapon. Who? Does it matter? The damage is done. High Counselor Thark Sol is using this as evidence that the cultural exchange program is fundamentally flawed. He's demanding immediate termination. The trap was springing shut around them. Riker could see the elegant simplicity of it. Discredit him. Remove Zalia from the program. End the experiment before it could threaten established power structures. "There's more," Darkin continued. "Intelligence suggests a radical Exerian faction called the Purists has been monitoring the exchange. They're threatening to withdraw from all human contact if they detect any signs of what they call genetic contamination." Genetic contamination? Interspecies relationships, physical or emotional intimacy, the kind of thing that could evolve into permanent bonds. Darkin's gaze was sharp, knowing. "Tell me, Sol, is there anything I should know about your relationship with Miss Varen?" The question was a minefield. Truth meant admitting to violations that could destroy careers and end the alliance. Lies meant abandoning Zalia when she needed protection most. "She's been professional throughout," Riker said carefully. "That's not what I asked." Before Riker could respond, his comm chirped with an emergency signal. Zalia's voice, tight with fear, crackled through the static. "Riker, they're moving me to secure quarters. My father says it's for psychological evaluation, but I think—" The transmission cut off mid-sentence. Darkin was already moving, his fingers flying over his comm controls. "Security? What's the status on the Exerian delegate?" "Confined to diplomatic quarters pending medical assessment, sir. High Counselor's orders." "On whose authority?" "Diplomatic immunity, sir. We can't interfere." The administrator's face went pale. "Son of a bitch. They're isolating her." Riker was on his feet, moving toward the door. "I need to see her." "Sol, wait. She's in trouble, Darkin. Real trouble. And if you go charging in there, you'll make it worse. Think tactically. What would help her more? A rescue attempt that confirms every suspicion, or a strategic response that protects the larger mission?" The words stopped Riker cold. Logic warred with instinct, duty against desire. But before he could decide, his comm crackled again. This time, It was High Counselor Tharksol's voice, formal and coldly furious. "Administrator Darkin, report to Conference Room Alpha immediately. We have a situation that requires immediate resolution." Conference Room Alpha had been transformed into a tribunal. Exerian security personnel stood at attention along the walls, their ceremonial weapons more decorative than functional but no less intimidating. At the center table sat Tharksol, his luminescence dimmed to funeral levels. Before him, a holographic display showed security footage from various parts of the station, corridor intersections, common areas, and most damning of all, maintenance tunnel access points. Darkin entered first, his diplomatic mask firmly in place. Riker followed, feeling like a condemned man walking to execution. "Gentlemen," Tharksol began, his voice carrying the weight of formal judgment, "I requested this meeting to address a critical breach of protocol." The hologram shifted, showing time-stamped footage of Riker and Zelia entering service tunnels, their body language intimate, their interactions clearly beyond professional boundaries. "As you can see, my daughter has been compromised by unauthorized contact with the cultural liaison. This represents a fundamental violation of exchange protocols, and more importantly, a corruption of Exerian values." Darkin stepped forward. "Counselor, while I understand your concerns, casual interaction between exchange participants is within established parameters." "Casual?" Tharksol's luminescence flared with anger. "Observe." The display changed again, showing thermal imaging from the abandoned observatory. Two figures, bodies intertwined, one blazing with bioluminescent arousal patterns that left no doubt about the nature of their activities. Riker's stomach dropped into his boots. They'd been so careful about electronic surveillance, but thermal imaging could penetrate their jamming devices. "This," Tharksol continued, "is evidence of genetic contamination. My daughter has been defiled by human appetites, corrupted by the very predatory instincts we sought to study at safe distance." "That's not what happened," Riker said, finding his voice. "No? Then explain this display of primitive mating behavior. It's called love, you pompous bastard." The room went silent. Even the security personnel seemed to draw breath at the blasphemy of a human addressing a high counselor with such disrespect. Tharksol rose slowly, his full height imposing in the conference room's confines. "Love? You claim to understand an emotion your species treats as territorial conquest? I understand what I feel for your daughter, and I know she feels the same. My daughter is mentally compromised. Exposure to human pheromones and aggressive courtship behaviors has damaged her psychological equilibrium. She requires immediate treatment." "Treatment?" "Purification therapy. A cleansing process that will restore her natural Xerian patterns and remove the contamination of human influence." Tharksol's tone was clinical, detached. "It will erase her memories of this entire experience, allowing her to return to normal function." The words hit Riker like plasma fire. They were going to lobotomize her, steal her memories, destroy everything they'd built together in the name of racial purity. "You can't do that." "I can, and I will. My daughter's ship departs in 6 hours. The therapy begins immediately upon our return to Exerian space." Darkin cleared his throat. "Counselor, with respect, Miss Varen is an adult by both our species standards. Doesn't she have a right to choose?" "Rights are subordinate to racial preservation. My daughter's individual desires are irrelevant compared to the larger threat of human influence spreading through our population." Tharksol gestured, and the security footage disappeared, replaced by communication logs showing transmissions to various Xerian colonies. The purist faction is already mobilizing. If word spreads that genetic contamination has occurred, They will demand complete severance of all human Exerian contact. Your alliance, Administrator Darkin, hangs by the slenderest thread. The ultimatum was clear: sacrifice Zalia to preserve the peace, or watch two civilizations slide toward Cold War. There has to be another way, Riker said. There is. Thargzol's gaze fixed on him with predatory intensity. You could confess that you coerced my daughter, used your position to exploit her natural curiosity, accept responsibility for the contamination, and I might be persuaded that she was merely a victim of human aggression. And then? You face trial for diplomatic assault. My daughter undergoes modified therapy, enough to remove traumatic memories but preserve her research data. The exchange program continues with proper safeguards. It was a devil's bargain, his freedom for her memory, his reputation for the Alliance. But looking at the cold calculation in Thargzol's eyes, Riker realized it was the only choice they were going to get. I need time to consider. You have 2 hours. After that, my daughter's ship departs regardless, and the purist faction receives full documentation of this contamination incident. As the meeting dissolved, Darkin caught Riker's arm. Saul, think carefully. This isn't just about you and her anymore. Millions of lives depend on this alliance. I know. But as Riker walked through Nova 5's corridors, watching the normal flow of interspecies commerce and cooperation, he wondered if an alliance built on lies and sacrifices was worth preserving at all. Somewhere in the diplomatic sector, Zalia waited in confinement, unaware that her memories, their memories, were about to be stolen in the name of political expediency. 2 hours to decide between love and duty, between personal happiness and the greater good. 2 hours to choose who would pay the price for their forbidden connection. The stars outside the viewport offered no answers, only the cold indifference of space watching another tragedy unfold in the endless dance of civilizations. Riker stared at his reflection in the observation deck's viewport, watching his face fragment across the reinforced transparisteel. Behind him, Nova 5 hummed with its usual commerce, oblivious to the deadline ticking down like a nuclear timer. 1 hour and 43 minutes until Zalia's ship departed. 1 hour and 43 minutes until her memories were carved away like diseased tissue. The diplomatic sector stretched below him, bristling with security checkpoints and armed Exerian guards. Getting to her quarters would be suicide, a fact that hadn't stopped him from mapping every possible approach in the past 2 hours. His comm buzzed, Darkin's voice, tight with exhaustion. Saul, where are you? We need to finalize your statement. What statement? The confession. Take responsibility for coercing Miss Varen, and maybe we can salvage something from this clusterfuck. Riker crushed the comm in his fist, plastic fragments drifting to the deck like snow. The confession would paint him as a predator and Zalia as a victim, but it would preserve the alliance. Millions of lives balanced against their happiness. The math was simple enough to make him sick. Fuck the math, he muttered and headed for the archives. The station's historical database lived in a forgotten corner of Level G, tended by an ancient AI that predated first contact by decades. Riker's military clearance still granted access. Apparently, bureaucracy moves slower than political exile. Computer, search Exerian cultural protocols. Focus on conflict resolution, emotional bonding, and... He paused, remembering fragments of conversation with Zalia. Search for references to Song of Breaking or similar phonetic translations. Processing. One reference found, classified under pre-contact anthropological studies. The file that materialized made Riker's blood freeze. Dr. Sarah Darkin, Administrator Darkin's sister, the xenoanthropologist who died in the Kepler incident 3 years ago. Her final report, transmitted hours before the pirate attack that had killed 43 Exerians and haunted Riker's dreams. The Song of Breaking, Sarah's recorded voice explained, represents the ultimate test of interspecies emotional authenticity. According to Xerian oral tradition, it can only be performed by one who loves beyond the boundaries of species, who would sacrifice everything for the beloved. The ritual requires the singer to experience genuine emotional resonance with Xerian linguistic patterns, something our xenolinguists believe impossible for human neural architecture. Riker's hands shook as he downloaded the phonetic guides, the tonal variations, the emotional subtext that transformed words into something approaching prayer. Sarah had died before completing her research, but she'd left enough breadcrumbs for a desperate man to follow. 2 hours to learn a song that took Xerian children years to master. 2 hours to perform the impossible. The first attempt sounded like gargling gravel, the second like a dying animal. By the dozenth repetition, something clicked, not understanding but recognition. The patterns weren't random. They followed emotional logic, each phrase building on the last like a musical equation. His comm buzzed. 30 minutes until departure. Riker ran. The diplomatic quarter hummed with preparation. Xerian personnel loading data cores, security teams conducting final sweeps, the ordered chaos of departure. Through the crowd, Riker caught glimpses of the transport ship, its hull gleaming with the impossible curves of alien engineering. He'd never make it past the checkpoints, not through official channels. But Nova 5 had arteries the security teams didn't know about. Maintenance shafts, cargo conduits, the forgotten spaces where a courier learned to move unseen. Riker slipped into a service hatch, following paths that Zalia had shown him during their stolen moments together. The irony wasn't lost on him, using her gifts to save her. The shaft emerged near Conference Room Alpha, where Tharksol held court with his inner circle. Through the ventilation grate, Riker could see the High Counselor reviewing departure protocols, his luminescence steady with satisfaction. "The contamination will be cleansed within hours," Tharksol was saying. "My daughter will return to proper function, and this unfortunate experiment can be forgotten." "What of the human?" asked one of the advisors. "Irrelevant. Once the confession is recorded, he becomes a cautionary tale, proof that human nature inevitably corrupts." Riker triggered his comm, broadcasting on all open frequencies. Every screen in the diplomatic quarter flickered to life, displaying his face. Security alarms began shrieking as guards tried to trace the signal. "Citizens of Nova 5, Riker began, his voice echoing through corridors and common areas. "My name is Riker Sol, and I have something to say." Thargzol shot to his feet, his skin blazing with fury. "Cut the transmission!" "Can't, sir," came a technician's voice. "He's broadcasting from inside the ventilation system, signals bouncing through the entire network." Riker took a breath, centering himself the way Zalia had taught him during their meditation sessions. Then he began to sing. The words came haltingly at first, his human throat struggling with alien phonemes. But emotion carried what technique couldn't: love given voice, desperation transformed into music. The song of breaking poured from him like blood from a wound, each phrase a piece of his soul offered to the void. In the diplomatic quarter, Xerians stopped moving. Their luminescence flickered in unison, biological responses triggered by sounds they'd thought impossible. The song spoke to something deeper than intellect, the primal recognition of genuine feeling. "Impossible," breathed one of Thargzol's advisors. "No human could master the emotional resonances." "He's not just singing," whispered another. "He's feeling. The neural patterns. They're authentic." Riker pushed through the second verse, the one Sarah Darkin had died before translating. But somehow the words came, as if Zalia's memories were flowing through him, guiding his pronunciation. The song built to its crescendo, a plea for understanding that transcended species, a declaration of love that made the universe itself pause to listen. When the last note faded, Silence filled the station like vacuum. Then, from the medical bay, came a sound that made every Xerian present catch their breath, the deep harmonic pulse of someone breaking free from neural isolation. Zalia's voice, raw but unmistakable, took up the song's final verse. Her words carried through the comm system, weaving with Riker's lingering echoes in a duet that spoke of souls recognizing each other across impossible distances. The medical bay doors burst open as Zalia emerged, her skin blazing like a newborn star. The neural isolation headset lay shattered on the floor behind her, its circuits overloaded by forces beyond Xerian understanding. "Impossible," Thark-Sol whispered. "The isolation protocol cannot be broken from within." "Can't it?" Zalia's voice carried new authority, strength forged in the crucible of forced separation. "Or have you forgotten what your own people are capable of when they refuse to be diminished?" She moved through the corridor like vengeance given form, security personnel stepping aside rather than face the nova bright fury of her luminescence. When she reached Conference Room Alpha, the assembled Xerians parted before her. "Daughter," Thark-Sol began, "you are ill. The contamination has—" "What contamination?" Zalia's eyes blazed electric blue. "The contamination of love, of growth, of refusing to let fear define my existence. You have been compromised by human influence. I have been awakened by it, just as he was awakened by ours." She gestured toward the ventilation grate where Riker's voice had emerged. "How did a human learn the song of breaking, Father? How did he master emotional resonances that your own scholars said were impossible?" Thark-Sol's luminescence faltered. He must have used technological assistance. He used love, pure, simple, devastating love, the kind that breaks barriers instead of building them." Zalia's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more force than shouting. "Tell them, Father. Tell them why I could break neural isolation. Tell them why his song carried our deepest truths." "I don't understand. Tell them about my mother." The words hit the assembled Xerians like a plasma burst. Several advisors stepped backward, their skin flickering with shock. Thark-Sol himself seemed to age decades in seconds. "Zalia, no. Tell them about Dr. Sarah Darkin. Tell them about the human xenoanthropologist who was captured during the Kepler incident. Tell them about the woman you fell in love with despite every law, every tradition, every barrier between our species." The confession hung in the air like an armed warhead. Around the conference room, Xerian officials processed the implications. Their high counselor, defender of racial purity, had done exactly what he now condemned. "Tell them," Zalia continued relentlessly, "about the hybrid daughter you've spent 25 years hiding, about the genetic integration you've been terrified would be discovered, about the fact that everything you've built is founded on the very contamination you claim to despise." Thark-Sol collapsed into his chair, luminescence dimming to almost nothing. She was extraordinary, brilliant, beautiful. I tried to resist, but love doesn't recognize borders, Zalia finished. Just as mine doesn't, just as his doesn't. From the ventilation system, Riker's voice emerged again, not singing now, but speaking with the quiet authority of someone who'd found his truth. "I know what it's like to carry guilt," he said, "to think you've failed everyone who trusted you. But maybe the real failure is pretending that connection is contamination. Maybe the real failure is choosing fear over growth." The service hatch opened and Riker dropped into the conference room. Security moved to intercept him, but Thark-Sol raised a hand. "Let him speak." Riker straightened, meeting the High Counselor's gaze directly. "Your daughter taught me that love isn't conquest. It's recognition, seeing someone's soul and choosing to protect it even when the cost is everything you thought you wanted." He turned to address the assembled Xerians. "You're afraid we'll corrupt your purity. But what if purity isn't the absence of change? What if it's the courage to evolve? Zalia moved to his side, her hand finding his. Where their skin touched, her luminescence flared brighter, patterns of light racing up her arm like living circuitry. "This is what you're afraid of," she said. "Not contamination, transformation. The possibility that we might become something neither of our species imagined." An advisor near the back of the room stepped forward, elderly, her luminescence the deep steady glow of age and wisdom. "High Counselor, with respect, perhaps it is time we examined our assumptions." "Philosopher Vexilara," Tharksol said wearily, "this is not the time for theoretical debate, isn't it?" The old Xerian's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent centuries studying the intersection of culture and evolution. A human learned our most sacred song. A hybrid broke neural isolation through will alone. A love story became a diplomatic revolution. When exactly would be the time to question our limitations? She gestured toward Riker and Zalia, still glowing where they touched. "Look at them. Not with fear, but with wonder. They are not contaminated. They are integrated. This is not corruption. It is synthesis." Around the room, other voices began joining the debate. Not the rigid chorus of agreement Tharksol commanded, but the messy, vital argument of beings wrestling with new ideas. "The purist faction will never accept this," one advisor warned. "Then, perhaps it's time the purist faction learned to evolve or face extinction," Philosopher Vexilara replied. "Stagnation is not purity. It's death wearing a noble mask." Tharksol looked around the room, seeing his carefully constructed consensus crumbling. When his gaze settled on his daughter, his expression was unreadable. "You would risk everything?" he asked her. "The alliance, the peace, the stability we've built?" "I would risk stagnation for growth," Zalia replied. "I would risk false peace for honest connection. I would risk the comfortable lie for the difficult truth. And if you're wrong, if this leads to war—" Riker spoke into the silence. "Then we'll face it together, human and Xerian, hybrid and pure, whatever that means anymore. But we'll face it as ourselves, not as the fearful shadows of what we might become." The vote was closer than history would record, 7-5 in favor of continuing the exchange program under new parameters. Not overwhelming support, but enough to crack the door on a new age. 3 months later, Riker stood on the observation deck of Integration Station, a joint construction project orbiting the neutral zone between human and Xerian space. Through the viewport, he could see ships from both civilizations docking together, crews that had learned to work as teams rather than suspicious allies. Zalia emerged from their quarters, her skin glowing with the particular luminescence that had become familiar over the past months, the pattern that meant new life growing within her. Their child would be something unprecedented, a bridge between species, a living symbol of what was possible when fear stepped aside for love. "Second thoughts?" she asked, settling beside him at the viewport. "Third and fourth thoughts," he admitted, "but still here." "Good, because I have news." She handed him a data pad showing communication logs from across Xerian space. Reports of other hybrids coming forward, of Xerian-human relationships emerging from secrecy, of a generation that refused to be bound by their parents' limitations. "Apparently," Zalia said with a smile that lit up the observation deck, "we started something." Riker pulled her close, feeling the warmth of her skin, the subtle vibrations of 2 heartbeats within her. "Think it'll work? This grand experiment in evolution?" "I think," she said, rising on her toes to kiss him, "that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and we've just learned how to weaponize it." Their kiss tasted like starlight and possibilities, like the future arriving ahead of schedule. When they broke apart, Zalia's luminescence had spread to his skin where they touched, a phenomenon the scientists were calling sympathetic resonance, but which felt more like coming home. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small drama of two species learning to become one. But in the observation deck of Integration Station, two souls who'd found each other across impossible distances planned for a tomorrow that neither of their civilizations had dared to imagine. The song of breaking had become a song of building, and this was only the beginning. 6 months later, their daughter would be born with eyes like ocean depths and skin that shifted between human warmth and Xerian light. She would grow up speaking 3 languages: Human Standard, High Xerian, and the new hybrid tongue that was emerging wherever their species worked together. They would call her Sira, a name that meant bridge in both languages, and she would be the first of many. Epilogue. 5 years later. The message arrived on a Tuesday, crackling through the quantum comm array with the familiar static of deep space transmission. Riker barely looked up from his workstation, where holographic blueprints of the new Cultural Integration Academy floated in 3-dimensional complexity. "Daddy, the sparkly lady is talking again," Sira announced from her play corner, her small voice carrying the musical cadence that marked her as something entirely new in the galaxy. Riker's head snapped up. At 3 years old, Sira had developed an uncanny ability to identify species by their biosignatures alone, a gift that emerged from her hybrid neural architecture. If she said, "sparkly lady," it meant a Xerian was calling, and there was only one Xerian who would use their personal comm channel. "Admiral Thark Sol," he said, activating the holographic display. The image that materialized was still imposing, but age had softened the harsh angles of Zalia's father's face. The title was new, earned through his work reforming the Syrian military's approach to interspecies cooperation. "Son-in-law," Thark Sol replied, the formal greeting they'd negotiated after years of carefully rebuilding their relationship. "I trust the family is well?" "Thriving." Sira's reading at a 5th grade level and speaking 4 languages. Zalia's presenting her research on hybrid neural development at the Galactic Medical Conference next month. Riker gestured toward the Academy blueprints. "And I'm trying to figure out how to build classrooms that accommodate 17 different atmospheric requirements. Perhaps I can assist. I'm calling because the Council has approved my proposal." Riker leaned forward. For 2 years, Thark Sol had been working to establish formal recognition of hybrid citizens within Xerian law, a process complicated by centuries of precedent and the still vocal purist minority. "The hybrid accords passed," Tharzol continued, his luminescence betraying barely contained satisfaction. "Unanimous vote. Even the purists couldn't argue with the economic benefits of integrated colonies." Economic benefits. Hybrid-designed ships are 30% more efficient than single-species models. Hybrid research teams have produced breakthrough technologies in medicine, agriculture, and quantum mechanics. The isolationists may hate change, but they love profit. Sira wandered over, climbing into Riker's lap with the casual confidence of a child who'd never known a universe where she didn't belong. Her skin shifted between human tan and Syrian luminescence as her emotions fluctuated, currently displaying the curious gold patterns that meant she was processing new information. "Grandpa Thar," she said, waving at the hologram, "Mama said you might visit for my birthday." "Indeed I will, little starlight, and I'm bringing friends. The full Integration Council wants to see how well our experiment is progressing." Through the apartment's main door, Zalia entered carrying groceries and radiating the particular excitement that marked her return from the laboratory. Her skin pulsed with discovery patterns, the bioluminescent equivalent of a grin. "Father?" She set down her packages and moved to embrace Riker from behind, her chin resting on his shoulder. "What's the occasion?" "The accords passed," Riker said simply. Her luminescence flared brilliant green, so bright that Sarah giggled and reached out to touch the patterns racing along her mother's arms. All of them? Even the citizenship clauses? All of them, Thark-Zol confirmed, including retroactive recognition for existing hybrids. Sarah is now officially a citizen of both the Human Federation and the Axirian Collective. What's that mean? Sarah asked, looking between her parents with those impossibly deep eyes that seemed to hold starlight. It means, Zalia said, lifting her daughter and spinning her around the apartment, that you belong everywhere and nowhere is forbidden to you. That night, after Sarah had been tucked into bed with stories in 3 languages and one entirely new hybrid dialect she was developing with the other children at the colony school, Riker and Zalia sat on their balcony watching the traffic patterns around Integration Station. The orbital facility had grown from a single joint construction project into a sprawling complex that housed research labs, diplomatic facilities, schools, and residential districts. Ships from dozens of species docked daily, their crews no longer strangers but neighbors in humanity's expanding definition. "Remember when you thought I was going to eat you?" Riker asked, lighting one of the herb cigarettes Zalia had introduced him to, a Xerian blend that produced mild euphoria without the carcinogens of Earth tobacco. "I remember being terrified of your barbaric meat-consuming ways," she replied, settling against his shoulder. Her skin glowed softly in the starlight, automatic response to contentment and physical contact. "Now look at us. You're practically vegetarian, and I've developed a disturbing fondness for synthesized bacon. Cultural exchange at its finest. Cultural evolution," she corrected. "We didn't just exchange customs, we created new ones." Through the transparent aluminum of their balcony floor, they could see the station's central garden, a biological marvel where Earth roses grew alongside Xerian light flowers, their different photosynthetic processes creating a living light show that attracted tourists from across the galaxy. "Sarah asked me something interesting today," Zalia said. "She wanted to know why some people called her family unnatural." Riker's jaw tightened. Despite the official acceptance, there were still those who viewed hybrid families as aberrations, a vocal minority that included both human extremists and Xerian purists. "What did you tell her?" "That nature is change, and we are nature expressing itself in new ways." Zalia turned to face him directly. "But I also told her that some people are afraid of change because it means admitting they might have been wrong about something important." Wise words for a 3-year-old. She's not exactly a typical 3-year-old. Through their apartment's walls they could hear the soft humming that meant Sarah was dreaming, a hybrid lullaby that she'd somehow created by blending human melodies with Xerian harmonic frequencies. It was hauntingly beautiful and completely unique to her neural architecture. "She's going to change everything," Riker said. "Her generation, all the hybrid children. They're going to grow up thinking the barriers we fought against are just ancient history." "Good. That's exactly what should happen." Zalia stood and moved to the balcony's edge, where the station's artificial gravity field met the vacuum of space. Her luminescence had shifted to the deep blue patterns that meant she was thinking about the future, not just tomorrow or next year, but the sweeping changes that would reshape galactic civilization. "I got the preliminary results from the neural development study," she said. "Hybrid children aren't just combining human and Xerian traits. They're developing entirely new cognitive patterns, enhanced empathy, intuitive understanding of complex systems, the ability to process multiple sensory spectrums simultaneously. Sounds like evolution in action. More than that, they're developing capabilities that neither parent species possesses individually. We're not just creating a new generation, we're creating a new kind of consciousness." The implications were staggering. If hybrid children represented a genuine evolutionary leap, then the future would belong to beings who thought and felt in ways their ancestors couldn't imagine. Sometimes I wonder, Riker said, if this is what we were meant to become all along. If meeting each other wasn't an accident but an inevitability. Destiny? Probability. Two species developing along parallel tracks, waiting for the right moment to converge and evolve into something greater than either could achieve alone. Zalia laughed, the sound mixing with the station's gentle hum and the distant music of Sarah's dreams. Listen to you, getting philosophical in your old age. I'm 37, ancient by frontier standards. She moved back to his side and he pulled her close, feeling the familiar electric tingle where their skin touched. Even after 5 years, the physical connection between them retained its intensity, love literally made visible through her bioluminescence. "Question," she said, her voice taking on the mock-serious tone that usually preceded either profound insights or elaborate pranks. "Are you still afraid I'm going to eat you?" "Terrified," he replied without hesitation. "Especially when you look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm dessert and you've been dieting." Her laugh turned predatory, and she bit his earlobe just hard enough to make him gasp. "Maybe you should be afraid. I've developed quite an appetite for forbidden things. Good thing I'm completely legal now." "Legal, yes. Safe? Absolutely not." Their kiss tasted like the herb cigarettes and synthesized bacon, like the impossible combination of elements that had somehow created a life neither of them could have imagined alone. When they broke apart, both were glowing, her with biological luminescence, him with the sympathetic resonance that scientists still couldn't fully explain. In the distance, a transport ship arrived from the Proxima colonies, its hull decorated with the intertwined spiral pattern that had become the symbol of the integration movement. Aboard would be more families like theirs, more children like Sarah, more proof that the universe's future belonged to those brave enough to love beyond the boundaries of species. "Come on," Zalia said, taking his hand and leading him toward their bedroom. "Let's go practice making more impossible things." As they disappeared into the apartment, their combined luminescence faded slowly, leaving only the gentle glow of integration station against the star field, a beacon of possibility in the endless dark, proof that even the vast emptiness of space couldn't diminish the light that love created. Outside their window, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of mortal beings. But the light of integration station burned a little brighter, and the future arrived one heartbeat at a time. The end.